Cool. Hi, everyone, and thanks for the meetup group for asking me to come along and present to you what I presented at Velocity back in October. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Cool, excellent. So yeah, this is about as non-technical as you get when it comes to performance, but the power of what I've been trying to do with the business is created something that marksandSpencers.com in the digital space now is one of their major priorities. So speed is up there as one of their big boulders, as they call them, to enhance our customers' experience and progress the development of our site and the offer we have online. So what I wanted to do, the talk basically gives a journey through where I picked up performance through to where we are today. And hopefully you might find it, I know Perry's mentioned already that he found it very useful. We had some great feedback. So I've kept it pretty much the same talk and put a few extra bits in where we've matured slightly in our analytics. But I'll go through this, and then at the end we can have questions. However, if you have questions during the talk, please feel free to throw up your hand and ask a question, and we'll go for it. Okay, so basically back in February 2014, Marks & Spencer's moved on to their own platform. We used to be hosted by Amazon, and so we had made a strategic decision to come off of Amazon platform and manage our own website. So that all launched in 2014 after a few years of a big program to get that launched. In March 2014, there was a big change from our delivery perspective. We've gone live, the big program had finished, and we need to do continuous development. So there's a big shift towards Agile, and anybody that has been or going through Agile knows it takes time, and we're still going through that process now, but compared to where we were 2 years ago, we're in a really good place and setting some standards across M&S that are now looking to be adopted. So that was an exciting time for everyone, albeit daunting, because it's a whole new way of working. The thing was that we'd already started using DevOps, and for me that's great because the continuous integration and delivery that we were doing had tools in place that eventually helped me do the things that we started to implement from a performance point of view. So that was great news. In April 2014, I joined what was known as performance engineering. So my background wasn't performance, and at that point, it's probably one of the few things that I didn't do in delivery. I'd done a lot of stuff, whether it be integration testing, functional, or delivering front-end stuff through different teams. I did the middleware for our website. I did a lot of finance reporting, but I hadn't touched performance. But no one else from Marks & Spencer's was involved in our performance engineering team. It was purely from our suppliers. So I got asked, can we shape performance for .com? And I said, okay, we'll give it a go. So the first thing we did was we let performance engineering carry on its very traditional way. We got ready for peak on our first Christmas. It was a priority. And so I sort of settled into the team for the first 6 months and observing as well as making sure the guys were able to succeed. And we get to end of September and we had to go for peak. That was great news. But the one thing, well, there was a few things. The transition to Agile hadn't really touched the performance team. We were still the traditional performance engineering team, and what did Agile mean for performance? I had no idea. I also noticed in my time that everything we did in the performance engineering team was basically test the back end. So all the way through to the back end systems, we weren't really looking at the front end. And so it was also obvious that we therefore had no insights what our customers were experiencing, but we had a stable website as best as we knew. So I asked myself 2 questions. So what does performance mean for a .com business? And the second question was, how does traditional performance engineering adapt to Agile ways of working? And so from the point where we'd sort of signed off peak and we go into sort of a BAU process to monitor and all this stuff, I started to do some research into what that meant. That research led me to who knows about this stuff. And I found out lots of people were going to this Velocity conference. I said, oh, I'll come along. What's it about? And I read it and I thought everything that everyone's talking about is related to performance. I've got to go to this conference. So I went along to Velocity in Barcelona. It was a great time. Fascinating. There's too many things to fit your agenda. It's like going to a music festival and there's so many bands you want to see and pick and choose. And so really one of the key things that I say to people that is, well, we don't have NFRs and we have these transactions. All these transactions are aspirations. If you want a page to load in 2 seconds, that's fine. If it loads in 4, that's fine too, but you want it to get better. So you can't just say it's failed because it's 4 seconds and not 2. So it's, all of these aspirations are what transactions are. So the one rule that we do have is that we should never get slower. So that's really the only NFR that exists. So we've got this A to B, and we need to test it through delivery. So we know what we're measuring. We've got the tools to be able to measure what our customers experience, but we also need to know that what we're delivering before it goes live. So the DevOps gives us these sort of processes to allow us to try things out. But the other thing is always in the definition of done, in the way we started going through all this Agile stuff, is making sure we get to done, but nothing's slower. That's just the golden rule. So all product owners now would have to justify why, oh yeah, we've put some extra CSS files in, and it's heavier, so there's more requests, and it's going to be a little bit slower. My answer would be, why is that? Why do you need to do that? Why can't you housekeep your CSS files and things like that? So we're empowered to ask those questions, but ultimately the product owner is acceptable for that decision, as long as they don't get slower. So how do we test performance when it's Agile? This is a very crude drawing, and some of you would say that's not Agile, I don't know, but I'm just trying to give the basic view of, I've got an idea, and it's going to go into a sprint, and in the sprint we're going to do all the bits that get us out the other end. And in the old world, and when we started transitioning to Agile, the volume of performance test still sat purely on the outside, and everyone hated us because they've done their sprint, but they can't go live because we've got to do a big performance test. And it's like, well, we're trying to figure out a way that we can reduce that time so you have a better cadence to go live. So we go off Jenkins. We provide lots of our own analysis into the product idea and the analysis itself. So any optimizations will feed in, and that's continuous within the sprint as well, and we help. In fact, the key thing for us is that people understand what we're doing to do optimization, the tools we use, and they'll adopt, and then we'll educate, and then they adopt those, and we can move on to other people to help. So we are only a service. We don't deliver anything apart from, or enable people, really. So we provide them as much information as we can. Yeah. What we try to do is have sessions, very small stand-ups with the point where they would do, at the moment we're at the point where they do sort of sprint shaping, because we don't need to be involved in what they do in the sprint. It was very difficult in the early days to try and be part of stand-ups because my team was a team of 4 people. And it's not that much bigger now. But we just had to dot ourselves around. So my team couldn't have a stand-up because everybody else's stand-ups. But you're right, it's being involved with those products until they've educated enough. Yeah. So automated performance tests. So if you think of the big PTs, we can automate those. So when you've got a build into a position where you want to actually test maybe the back-end stuff, you bring up a single JVM on the cloud and you do some tests. You can use things like JMeter. You may have a big performance test tool. You can get a free version of it, you know, of tools that you want to do. But the key thing is you can do an automated performance test, but it will only ever be indicative of the big performance test. And you have to really understand what it's telling you. One of the key things if you go down this route is that you can't just do a performance test of simulating in smaller loads what you do in the big PT environment unless you capture some form of diagnostic data. If it fails, what do? The environment's blown away. The engineers have nothing to go on apart from it failed. So there needs to be some thought into how you'd actually capture all of the sort of diagnostics to sit down the next day and say, drill in. So APM agents could be used for that if you can capture it in a way on the cloud, bring it in and do some diagnostics. In the build itself, when the engineers are developing their front-end pages, we, at the moment, are using sitespeed.io. There's loads of different tools to do this. We have been considering whether we bring on-premise the web page test, so we have a similar way of doing some live and on lower environment tests. But the key thing here is that every engineer must be able to measure the components of their page, and we will set budgets with them, you know, how many or how much weight and all this stuff, so that we don't end up having more CSS files inadvertently or more JavaScript, because the more things there are, the slower it's going to get. If everyone does that, all the pages are going to slow down. So we put some tooling in there, so build on build, they can actually test. They're not getting any slower. And because the product owners define the performance transaction and they understand what we're measuring, they're keen to know that we're not going to get slower because it's the only rule. And then in design, we've started to have discussions with our UX guys now, and how we're doing image optimization and what the shape of the pages are. And we're going to try and do some deep dives into, if we deconstruct our pages from a UX point of view, is there any optimizations we can do there? And this is all part of trying to get into the performance mindset. So even before we've built something, people are thinking of performance in the design stage. So we got options in how we started to work into Agile. And we've actually got to the point now where we even ask the question, do we need to do a performance test? And because of the changes that we've made and the optimizations and the sort of focus on speed and the way we're changing our front end, we don't need to do performance tests. IT ops find that weird. Oh, no, you've not done the performance test. But we've built a relationship that they now ask us and we say it's fine, and they learn to trust us. But that's taken time. So that transition to Agile creates very sort of nervous sort of views in the IT ops world, but we've just built that relationship so that they trust us. They know that if we say it's going to be okay, it's okay. But what we're also trying to let them know is that it's also okay to fail. Agile has to fail sometimes, but we need to be able to turn things on or off, and features are an important thing. So we'll measure it, and we've got the tools to measure it in live. So if it doesn't work, we'll turn it off and we'll go back to the drawing board and feed back in. But we can get away with not doing big PT tests, and that's great. So just a quick checkpoint on sort of where we are in this journey. So we know what we're going to measure. We know how we're going to monitor what we measure. We know how to test what we want to measure. So the next challenge. So how do we action what we measure? We have this insight, who needs it? And what will they do with this insight when we give it to them? So how do they interpret the information that we provide them? So one of the, I think, the most key rules here is that when you start with these tools, you can sort of look at it and go, wow, loads of data, but actually start basic. So I'm going to show you some visualizations in a minute that are so basic that it tells a story all on its own. And you have to then build up people's interpretation of this data. Visualizations are completely the way to go with this, and so that anyone understands there's a problem. It's important that you effectively communicate with the people that need to know about this, and like I said, visualizations are the way forward. And this eventually builds a performance mindset, and something will happen that people will go, oh my God, we've just got to get faster. So what I'm going to do is show you some basic run, sort of go through some of the stuff that we did in our early days to give you an indication of what happened. So this is a really good visualization that says something didn't go quite right here. And this is something that no one else found. But you can see clearly the blue line is the speed line and the green section is the page views. And we happen to lose 800 customers per minute for 15 minutes on our basket page. And the third-party tag had broken. And at the point we did this, we could see it, but we weren't mature enough to understand about third-party tags yet as a team, but we knew it was the third-party tag that had caused this problem. Nobody else, even IT ops, saw this. And they spent 3 days trying to prove that our tool was wrong because it's new, and it must be wrong because it's new, and we haven't implemented it, and the data is wrong. And they came back 3 days later and said, yeah, it was a third-party tag. We found it. So it was like, great, well, we saw this as it was happening. And luckily, it fixed itself. We don't know how, but it fixed itself. But that cost us money. But at the time, they didn't believe us. They didn't even get logged as an incident. This is an interesting one. I know this is March the 20th. It's a Friday. Mark Bolland had come round the office, and we'd only had the tool on for literally a few days. And me and the team, at the point where you can see it sort of starts to drop down here, it's quite a sharp drop there. You can't see it because of the blue line. And we're just like, wow, what's going on? It's just lost loads of customers really quickly. But the speed line's not really telling us much. We weren't sure about it. But then it recovered. And we stood there trying to figure out, and someone came up to us, have you seen what everyone's doing? It's like, what? They're looking out the window. And it's like, oh, yeah. So actually what had happened was we'd seen the impact of a solar eclipse on our site because we'd lost customers because people stopped doing stuff, but the speed wasn't an issue. And so actually, if we drew a line, if we carried this trend on and did conversion and basket, we can actually put a pound value against the solar eclipse impact on our revenue. We didn't because, it was just one of the things. But it was just an interesting story to tell Mark Bolland on the day that he came around the office so we could tell him that Solar Eclipse was costing money. So anyway, it's sort of a random thing. This is another great one for the business, and the IT ops love this as well. It's like, wow, we've put this email out and all of a sudden huge amounts of traffic on the site, but the blue line in fact gets quicker, and it's perceived to get quicker because you've got a bigger sample set, so the data is more accurate. And so this is a really good one to show that we can deal with this stuff. I mean, when we first went live, somebody had made the mistake of not caching a link that we sent out on emails, and of course that was a big problem, and we got through it. We didn't crash the site, but it had a real sort of potential impact that we had, and we learned through that. This is another one, and this is weird because when I presented this to the product teams, they had a round of applause when I showed them this, because this was changes that they had made, and we showed them within 2 days that they made a speed impact, and they were so happy, they applauded it. And I said, well, you did the work. But they used to wait days and days to find out if their optimizations have made any impact, and all of a sudden we put some real user metrics in, measurements in, and we can show this stuff nearly real time, really, step changes in, hey, we've done a good thing. And actually, if we can work out the distance between the blue lines, there's some sort of revenue that's been generated there. This is another really sort of straightforward visualization that tells a story. And you know, I'm comfortable telling you guys that our tablet experience isn't great, because anybody can go and measure our website like we measure other companies' websites to see how we compare against them. And this shows a story that if you overlay the different types of devices, they're not consistent. And it's super important that our customers have a consistent experience. And it doesn't matter if your mobile or your tablet is on 3G or 4G, they need a consistent experience. And so I think it's important that we try to adapt those devices and what we put on those to make sure. So here what we see is the blue histogram shows that the desktop's got quite a nice shape to it. The green tablet is further to the right, which means it's slower. It's not quite as nice a shape because it's very fat across the middle, whereas the mobile is a better shape, but it's still not where we want it to be. One of the weird things that we noticed in the speed lines that we were measuring, it seems to get slower during the evening. We always used to think, is someone running a batch process? What's going on in the evening? Until we started seeing this, because basically the tablet gets popular when people go home, and our tablet experience is not very great from a speed point of view. So the more people that use tablet, our site is perceived to be slower. So we can start using this evidence to show our developers we've got to do something about it. Waterfalls are great. This is a great one where we weren't really sort of lazy loading images and stuff in the early days. It's like, oh, we were loading all 98 images before we've started to render. We can't do that. We need to do something different. And so there's lots of low-hanging fruit that these tools started to sort of show us. In fact, I'm currently looking at Marks and Spencer's have international franchise sites that have got 8 companies that have our brand and they have their sites, and we're starting to do some of this with them as well, because they're not as mature from a performance point of view. And this is really valuable because we can get lots of low-hanging fruit just to get them back on track. So these are simple, powerful ways to communicate how good we are or not. And I think it's good to be sort of open about that. Now, this was one that I did with the business, and I showed them a video of us and some competitors. And then web page testing, those tools can do this. But to show them videos side by side is very powerful. They don't like it if we're slower than our competitors. And so they want to know why and how we can get better. Why are they quicker and we're not? But this is a really good way of doing it. It's not just a number, it's visual. Film strips, again, show the business why it's important, but actually it's really good for us to show product owners about when we talk about speed index. Yes, we painted something on the page really quickly, but hey, it takes a long time to get to page load or to visually complete. And so again, it's powerful, and we can use it for comparisons purposes, not just of our competitors, but across our own pages. Competitor analysis in a different view there with different sort of metrics. And we started to do this independently now, scheduling web page tests through our analytics tooling so we can visualize it ourselves. We've started to learn and mature a lot. So we don't need to use the tools to do this. We can use that for something else. So we get this lots of insight, and it's great. So we started showing people all this stuff, and everyone's like, oh yeah, it's really interesting. And it's just trying to get the buy-in. It's like, well, how important is it to everyone? No one really knew until someone would come to us and we had a breakthrough. And the breakthrough was this. if we see the speed line, we send that very basic speed report every week. And the green line here clearly shows from around about week 15 now, I think it's week 15, yeah, about week 15, oh my God, we're getting slower. And for 2 weeks, we're trying to figure out why we're getting slower, and we didn't know. And then one of the guys started working on one of the tools that we just started to use. And we were starting to figure out what it was. But while we were doing that, the business came to us and said, I think it's, do you see it's a green or a yellow line? Well, anyway, the green or the yellow line, however you see it, is our performance customer satisfaction survey that we do. The blue line is our overall customer satisfaction number. And what was interesting, they started to realize that the performance feedback was tram lines to our overall CSAT score. But actually, we noticed that our speed line was going in the opposite direction. So we said, yeah, it's related. So what happened was we started to look a bit further, and we started to measure our third-party content. And so believe it or not, at this time, nearly 70% of our homepage content was third-party requests. I just didn't understand that. It was a mess. But no one had ever really looked at it. So Simon's sat in the middle there. This is Simon's sort of request maps that you can get online. Or if you use the NCC tooling, you'll get it through that as well. And in fact, we started to do our own versions of this, although it's not quite as good, but it's still interesting. We can do a lot more with it. But this is what it looked like. So basically, there's our website, and there's our assets. That's it. Every other single blob on that page is the third party. What's really interesting is if you trace one of the flows around here, you go 9 parties for something we call third party. It's like, okay, well, why are we doing that? No one really knew. In fact, if you also look in the middle, there's lots of blobs that are being called multiple times by different things. And it's like, oh, crikey, it's like a firework display gone crazy. So we went to the marketing team. We said, hey, marketing tags, you got to tell us why you use it, why it's important to you. So one of the key things is to make people not hate you for telling them something's going wrong. So we said, because otherwise they're not going to change anything. But they didn't know this. So we asked them why marketing is important, what revenues it generates, and all this stuff to get the context. And then we said, right, we won't forget that. Then we showed them what we saw. Andy Davies was working with us at the time, and he showed them what, if you had no third-party tags, we'd be 50% quicker. And it was like, okay, this is interesting. So we just wanted to make sure that they understood what we were doing, but we also wanted them to know we weren't going to just say you can't do this, because it's important to the business. Marketing needs to happen. So what we ended up with was working with them, working with the third-party providers, the actual housekeeping. We moved on to a tag management tool all over a period of a few weeks, and then we changed it to this. Now, even this isn't perfect. And we're still working with the marketing team about what's the ceiling? How many tags do we need to have on our site? Because we need to put a ceiling on it and create a budget. And so we're working towards that. But we now have a governance process in place that means that you don't see the duplicates. And we work with them when they put a new tag on, they tell us. So we understand and we can check it, say synchronous, it's not going to block anything and all this stuff. And this is what happened. You can see we slowly reduced the third-party content over a few weeks. And by the time we got to week 24, our speed at the time was the fastest it had ever been. So this has obviously been a legacy problem for us. The other thing is our other chart began to change shape. Speed got quicker, CSAT went up. Head of marksandspencers.com go, whoa, I'd never thought I'd achieve the objective, and I've suddenly met my objective within a few weeks of saying it's never going to happen. And so we had such a big impact on this. It became super important for our business to know our customers care about page load. So earlier on when I said, what do you measure? We measure page load because our customer satisfaction absolutely correlates with page load. If we were measuring something earlier in the page, which we were at the time, that was running like a pancake. We would never have known about this. So it doesn't always work, and different metrics for different teams, but this one really does for us. So speed's a priority. We have to monitor its impacts, and the optimizations can be made by the business as well. And that's really important. So all of our business teams talk to us now. What can we do? What can we do? And things. And it's like, wow, this is great. So all of a sudden we've got loads of people that we need to engage with. So what I've done is, since the velocity, I've put in a few things, because since velocity, we got through peak, but we've matured our site speed analytics. And site speed analytics is like really powerful. We spent 2 hours with our LT and run out of time, but it was a really fact-driven meeting, and it was fascinating. One of the things is that there are lots of studies out there, and you all read blogs about this and that, and page loading conversion and stuff. But actually, I find doing our own more interesting because it's different. I'm going to show you why. So some of the things that we look at when we do our site speed analytics isn't just conversion. Okay, we look at how speeds influence SEO and marketing. So on the first, I'm going to say single page visits. If you think about how many single page visits came in from Google, that's going to impact our SEO score. And marketing care about that. How the impact and benefit of personalization and third-party tags. We've got to do a lot of work around that because personalization is a problem too. Identifying what we can't control is important. I'll show you some examples. So I wanted to put this in. I haven't put any numbers in there because I wasn't sure if I was allowed to, but I just took it off just to be safe. But the point is the visualization is what's important. This histogram shows the amount of page views and time, and the orange bar shows the conversion. Now, most of the studies you see online say, but the conversion will reduce over time and all this stuff. But what we find is that our conversion line is a lot flatter than the studies you see online. And partly because our Marks and Spencer's customers shop with Marks and Spencer's because they love the brand, well, they're buying Marks and Spencer's because they want Marks and Spencer's. So we have a slightly different dynamic with some of our customers. There's people that wait 14 seconds to convert. So it's like, okay. So it's not quite as true to some of the studies that are done out there that say you must. I found out, and I don't know if it's true, that when Amazon stated that for every sort of 100 milliseconds they generate 1% revenue, I believe that was just on one page. It was just a quick study of one page, not their site as a whole. So it's a bit of a, what does that mean? Because everyone asks us, well, what's 1% of our revenue and all this stuff? And it's like, well, I can't really tell you because our conversion is slightly different. But it's still super useful for us to understand what our customers are doing. So exploring other things that speed correlate to becomes important too. This is an interesting one because the red line shows our page load getting faster and the green line shows the amount of single page visits reducing. That, for the business, is really powerful as well. This is where the marketing guys are like, well, how many of those single page visits come from Google, and have we reduced the amount of Google ones because of our sort of performance marketing? But at the same time is, if conversion doesn't go up, that doesn't mean to say you failed. What might have happened is there's just more people on the site. You've made more money. So conversion isn't always the one number that tells the story. Actually, this is more powerful to me right now because we've shown we've kept more people on the site. Here's another one. So I call this like the river reflection. So if you see the blue bars across the top, it's the page views, and there's a line on it. And so the speed line, if you see here in particular, you can see over the Saturday and Sunday, it gets quite high. Saturday and Sunday gets quite high. What this shows us is the breakdown of desktop, mobile, tablet. It goes back to the other graph I showed you earlier. But what it's telling us is that you can sort of see when the speed line goes up, the reflection of the tablet at the bottom goes up too, which means more people on the weekends are using mobile and tablet, and because our site's not as quick on mobile and tablet, our speeds degrade over the weekend. So it's a problem. Social hours for us is not our fastest time. When people at the office going on their desktop, their site's super quick. So again, we're starting to break down daily trends and all this stuff to talk to the business. They understand why the numbers are the way they are, but we can use this as evidence to go back to the dev teams to say, you've got to get a consistent experience for our customers. I took out the competitors. Again, I wasn't sure who's turning up tonight or whether they would challenge me. But one of our LT was like, how do we compare against our competitors? And I showed them a graph last summer, and he held us. He's like, at last, somebody's told me we're not as good as we think we are. And I think it's important to understand that and not to sort of like pretend that we are. So, I don't know, about 6 months ago, this is all relative. So we use synthetic tests to work out how quick we are compared to others. So the colors that show the speed are relative to each other, whereas the size of the box shows the weight of the pages. So we had quite a big box, and relative to the competitors, we were slow. But then if you look at now, we're a smaller box and we've gone green because compared to our competitors in a relative sort of, this is where having an analytics person in the team helps a lot, shows that actually we're the only ones that made a move. In fact, B got far worse, but we've made a significant jump. And so even though we're not as good as our competitors, in relation to where we were, we've made some big improvements. And so it's a positive message, even though we're not where we need to be. So again, the power of analytics mixed in with speed is becoming quite powerful for us. This is about things we can't control. So I'd never even thought about ISPs until we started digging out some graphs. And for some reason, Tiscali and TalkTalk, we just didn't, the website didn't work on it back in the weeks that you see there, but now it's a lot better shape. Well, I don't know why that was, but those customers on those ISPs, there's nothing we could have done about it because it worked on all the others. So I don't know, it was difficult, but this is a retrospective view of something that is interesting, but there's nothing we can do about it. This is one I quite enjoy, is we saw, hey, look, we've lost loads of customers. What's gone wrong? The Speedline's okay. And if you look at the bottom, Sky had an outage for 12 minutes. So all those customers on Sky dropped off our website. And so we could see that dent in our page views. Interestingly, we also had some fluctuations in speed in the evening, which we couldn't understand. But because we took a look at our, we were looking at ISPs, we see how Sky throttled the broadband in the evening. So they probably oversubscribed to the BT backbone and can't deal with it, so they're throttling their customers or something. But we can see the impact it's having on our site speed. Again, we can't do anything about that. Interestingly, though, again, we spotted that as it was happening, and IT Ops had no idea it even occurred. So we have to go in and say, here's a retrospective incident you need to raise. But again, is it an incident? I know we couldn't really do anything about it. But some of our customers might have phoned in. I was on your website and it crashed. Well, it wasn't. But there's interesting ways how we can work with our contact center to relay messages back to our customers. This is one, I threw this in there because I was just interested if people see this as well. But we're looking at the transition of Chrome and how it's enforced, how it's adopted, and compared to IE. And then we noticed that Chrome is actually slower than IE. I didn't know that was the case, but it is. And so right now, IE is faster than Chrome. So again, it's like for our developers and our teams, it's interesting to start looking at, well, how many people use IE on our site? And why is IE quicker? And have we not done something on Chrome, or is it Chrome doing something? And we can start doing some sort of like research into what if we missed something, or because Chrome was always the faster of the two. But again, the analytics allows us to sort of dive into this information. So optimizations based on metric-driven decisions allows us to have business-focused metrics which ensure the optimizations are prioritized. And it's really important because the dev guys will always be given new features or new things to put on the website because the business want. But right now, they really care about speed. So actually the feeding from the business is what we're doing to make our customers' experience fast and snappy. And it's really, really enjoyable to be in an environment where that's the case. So I'd like to think that what we've done over the last sort of 8 or so months has allowed this change in the mentality and the performance mindset. But one of the key facts is that since we started proper monitoring last July, we're 37% faster than we were. And that's a trend that we are continuing to grow. So this is the journey. We had basic performance engineering. We layered it with lots of new ideas. Something got very busy for the team. Not all of these things have matured, but what next? We're going to keep going with the analytics. I think that's really powerful. We're going to mature our capabilities. We're even getting fancy with our performance transactions and the methodology. We've actually worked out how we can create a performance transaction documentation as part of functional designs in the retail world. It doesn't necessarily, not necessarily works as much in the Agile, but there's lots of opportunities that we're taking forward. We want to put more budgets in there. We want to get more metrics and drive KPIs. And we want business guidelines, marketing and tagging and imagery and all the things that they could do to impact the site once it's been delivered. And then going into that design phase as well. Well, how can we design better things? So really the rule, the performance is everywhere, and there is one rule, which is never get slower. Thank you very much.
Right, what a great talk. I hope you enjoyed it this time round as much as I enjoyed it the first time I was here, and it's even better this time. Right, I've got some time for questions. I had a couple of problems where you've seen me keep dashing up and down. The stream broke down about 2 times. The pizza's turned up half an hour early. Thank you, Domino's UK, if you're here for that one. Right, right. So apologies for me keep getting up and down. But any questions before we move on to having a beer and general chat? Right, 2 in the second row here. We'll hand over.
Hi, so I have a question that sounds quite generic, but I'm hoping it's going to be focused on I'm interested in sort of analytical answer. Tablet page load, whatever your metric is, seems to always be slower than mobile and desktop. What's your sort of hypothesis on why that is? And I'm kind of interested in anything you've seen in the numbers from performance rather than, because people build crap websites or.
Yeah, so if you look at the M&S site, and again, you can go and look at the site on tablet and see that it's the same site you see on the desktop, and so it doesn't adapt, and it's probably because there's too much JavaScript. So tablets don't work very well with JavaScript, and so we need to start moving away from that. We need to have a mobile first approach on tablet, and ours isn't quite there yet. So that's one of the key things. But again, moving JavaScript. One of the problems with tablet is that the majority, I think, a huge percentage of our tablet traffic is on iPad. And so Apple don't comply with the W3C nav timings, and so you just don't really know what's going on. So we need to start searching out ways to do our own waterfalls through some sort of sniffing or something. But we can't use our waterfalls through our tooling that we've got because we can't see what our iPads are doing. And because that's the majority of our traffic, we're just looking at ways to go in there. But we do know mobile first and less JavaScript.
Is that specific to tablet? Is that not the same for smartphones, iPhones?
Yeah, go for it.
So what I kind of noticed is that so generally with a phone, right, you're tied in to a contract and your phone gets updated, where tablets are more expensive and you don't get a new one so often. So we noticed like the CPU, the potential of it being able to render is a lot slower because it's harder for it to process. So tablets are often older, so they just take longer to render. That's what I noticed anyway.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm honest with you, I'm not the techie in the team, so I get the engineers to do this. I guess I drive and steer. So I look at it in a very basic way, which is why my answer is probably not as in depth as it could be. I don't know if anyone else has got answers to that in a generic form other than the actual CPU and stuff. But we do monitor it as best we can, but trying to find out what we do. The key thing for us is we've got to go to a much more mobile first experience for our customers on the tablet.
Did you perhaps notice that it was just tablets had increased in use and the mobiles have stayed the same? That's why you saw the change. Is that all it is?
No, the tablet's slower. It's much slower. So the more of them, it shows the site speed down. But why the tablet's slower, which is sort of really the question, is how do we make tablet quicker? For us, is we've got to do a different approach for tablet.
But if you'd have seen more mobiles instead of more tablets, would you have seen the same?
Well, yeah, because we're monitoring tablet in isolation as well. It's just that we see it more globally in our metrics that we provide. Because if we showed some of our graphs to our business, they say, oh, how can we get slower at the weekend? Well, it was because more people on tablet. It was as simple as that. If we had less people on tablet, it wouldn't be as noticeable. So it might not get as much focus, but I'm glad it has because it can only make things better for us. But there's probably loads of reasons as to why tablet doesn't necessarily work as well. I'm probably not best qualified to answer that question, so apologies for that. Yeah.
Adam.
Yeah, my question was around, first of all, like, thanks. It was very interesting, especially coming from sort of like the development side. So with the rule never get slower, I had a devil's advocate side, which is say someone came to you with a addition to the product or new feature, whatever you want to call it, that significantly increases conversion but has a performance impact. Like how do you negotiate with that? How do you deal with that?
So I got there's things out like personalization, for example. If you want to do some personalization, you're going to introduce some sort of JavaScript stuff, something that goes on the page that repaints the DOM and all that stuff. So I never make the decisions, but I provide as much steer and recommendation as I can. So it's understanding the purpose of what they're doing. So right now, our teams have got the site pretty quick in the best way they can, and there's so much more to do. But it wouldn't take much, like you say, for someone to come along and say, we want to do this. And by doing that, it's going to slow down that page. Now, that means the people that own the pages from a delivery point of view, it's going to screw their metrics and KPIs and stuff. And so it's up to the business and those guys to have a conversation. I'll say, I don't want you to get slower, but if there's a reason for it, then I don't know, it's one of those things. It goes back to analytics. Well, if they do some A/B tests on some of those stuff and prove that it's generating money, are they generating more money through that enhancement than we might have done if we'd have increased the speed of the page? So again, it comes down to individual case-by-case things. Like I said, it's interesting to see the conversion on ours, because I know if you get faster, you'll make that much more conversion. But if we keep people on the site, the same conversion generates more revenue. We might be a bit slower, but it depends. Being a little bit slower might not impact us as much as other sites. But I just try and put as much information out there, and they've got to justify what it is. But never get slower is just the main rule, unless there's reasons as to why it's acceptable for the product owners to go for the features they want to put in. So it's not a hard and fast rule. It's just part of this whole get rid of NFR business.
Cool. Thanks.
I'll come to you in the back in a second, but I just got something also to add on. The graphs that Andy showed about, speed correlation with conversion, and he's saying that, well, for Marks and Spencer's, it doesn't tell the typical story. Well, on resale ticketing, which is what the area that I've done this kind of study on, it's also not the same as you see out there. Okay, so don't just read the theory and expect that to kind of go through for you. You have to measure yourself and find out what your impact is. I would say that, again, what I think is kind of the actual factor, maybe for Marks and Spencer's, and it certainly is in the ticketing industry, that buying a ticket is an emotional process, right? You really love the band, you want the ticket, you will wait if that is the only thing that you can do to get that ticket. It's the same. You can't buy Marks and Spencer's clothes anywhere else. And there is incredible brand loyalty there. So people are kind of more naturally, prepared to put up with it. But you are still effectively losing money overall. You may not be able to really move that conversion percentage, but like Annie says, you keep people on your site for longer, increase the number of page views per visit, you will make more money in the end. So, but it's the measurement of it. And again, you touched it on the last question about, if somebody comes along with a fantastic widget that they say is going to create a lot of extra money and stuff like that, we'll put the measurement in place to actually, record, has that feature actually delivered the revenue that was forecast for it, and things like that. It is possible to do that.
Yeah, some features go at the end of the page anyway. There are things that you can just push to the back, and it's not a problem. Like the CSAT surveys, they come at the end, they pop up whenever they pop up, but it doesn't impact necessarily the customer's experience. But personalization is an interesting one, because a lot of companies want to do that, and that does have to go in very early, because you're going to put a different DOM in there. So those are the ones that I find interesting, but there's not much I can do to say no, because it's part of what the business need to do. So it's like marketing, it's a compromise.
Hi, yeah, I was just wondering, a lot of the performance optimization seems to be on the front end, and you mentioned about low-hanging fruits and these tools that allow you to kind of pick those out and optimize them. Have you done much optimization on the back end?
Yeah, I sort of, because at the very start of the talk, I talk about the old performance engineering, and everything was focused on the back end, but no one had really understood the front end. So, the back end actually has been pretty optimal. There are some areas that we have got a lot of focus on, but that sort of stayed as is. So yeah, I haven't really talked about it too much in this talk, because the big thing that changed us is, is seeing what happens on the front end, what our customers experience, and we were so blind to that actually that's the influence that we have on the business. because they care about our customers and colleagues, because our colleagues use this in store as well. So it has to be really fast for them. The back end was pretty efficient in most cases, but you'd see it on the front end anyway. But yes, we do optimization on the back end in quite a lot of detail.
Yeah, it's just one, if you've ever come across the original Steve Souders surveys, he kind of did the 80-20 rule, where actually 80% of the customer experience is spent through the front end application than it is the back end application. And the way that I kind of think, I think that pretty holds true, but you mustn't ignore that 20%. And where I feel the focus on the back end should be not necessarily on out and out speed, but it's about bottlenecks that cause you scaling problems is more where I feel that the back end performance measurement comes in. We got any more questions? Because when I went down the back, there was a huge waft of pizza smell that came through the doors, right? And I don't want them to get really cold. So we'll have 2 more questions, and then we'll break, and we can have plenty of chat afterwards anyway.
Hey, thank you very much. So my question is more around the team structure. What are the benefits of having a centralized performance team over making it the responsibility of all of the individual Agile teams? Is kind of, that's their performance responsibility. And how do you make sure that you're not the bottleneck of information?
So my eventual role is to make us redundant. Absolutely, but we are a kickstart to get the priority. So eventually, like for the .com area of Marks and Spencers, I don't think it'll be too long before the engineers are just taking some of the stuff we do. We come up with loads of ideas. I'm always thinking about new ideas about how we can do stuff. So, but some of the things like the automated performance testing and the speed tests within sprints, having given people a steer that we can do this and it's feasible, and we might run a capability or a proof of concept study, the engineers will suddenly just, right, come on, let's go and do it, and then they'll evolve it and they'll adopt it, and it will suddenly be more mature than I realized, because they've taken it forwards, and that's what we try to encourage. So what was the second part of your question there?
It was, how do you make sure that your team isn't the bottleneck with the information you hold? So all of the product owners or
right, so
you, but you don't have the bandwidth to give them the information they want.
So part of the way I approached that was that those slides where I said keep it simple. So we just measured a few basic things and a few basic visualizations. And as we introduced those to the teams and taught them through the tooling, because they can all access the tools, how they can have their own basic sort of visualizations. While we were doing that education in the background, we were learning the next bits of maturity, as in how much more detail, like looking at ISPs and looking at the different browser OS combinations. We didn't do that for a while. We just focused on the basics that gives people something. Because, like I said, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. So a lot of these things could, the videos, for example, exposing a lot of the things that we knew were out there means that people focused on those obvious things, and we try and figure out how we could find more deeper problems. But eventually, as we get to where we are now, there's a lot of product owners that come to me that I've seen some amazing dashboards. They're using the widgets on the dashboards, and they're beyond where we are. And so they're actually using it day in, day out. In fact, some of the product owners are so obsessed by speed that they're doing loads of stuff. And so I feel comfortable that I just move on to the next team that needs education, so that they then adopt, and then they'll mature as well. So I'm trying to do it in a bit of a step-by-step layered fashion, but just keep it simple to start with, so that I don't think we ever were a bottleneck, because I don't think anyone really knew the expectations of the data we were providing. Only now are LT and the finance guys all trying to find out more information about where we are. And I've matured the team, and you've got to have either a data scientist or a web analytics person that can do all these statistical things to bring and do the visualizations. Otherwise, I couldn't have done that. They've shown me so much ways of interpreting the data. Having people like that in the PerfOps team is crucial.
Any more for any more? One more at the front. You've got your hand up first. It's definitely a win for this side on the questioning.
I just wondered, all the graphs you showed, they're all web related. I mean, do you actually have online revenue graphs
against time? Is that the sort of thing that you can literally correlate
We
the revenue as opposed to customer satisfaction? So.
Yeah, so we will look at all of those things. So I didn't want to focus on revenue because you see studies that talk about the revenue and conversion a lot. I just wanted to sort of highlight that there's a lot more ways of looking at speed correlating to other things that you can tap into that actually, the single page visits, we got the marketing team so excited about that. It's like, great, this is cool. But yeah, we do that. It's just I didn't necessarily show it here because that's the sort of standard ones.
Okay, right. Well, I'd just like to thank, and we should all thank Andy again for the fantastic talk tonight.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.